Time to take a look at what's making the headlines in the papers. Joined by the author and broadcaster Emma Wolfe. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Good to have you with us. There's only really been one story in town for a couple of weeks now, but today feels particularly, I don't know, the mosaic of strikes and war feels particularly complex today.
It does, particularly explosive, I would say. I mean, yesterday we saw the huge sort of attack on South Pars, this massive, the biggest, the world's largest gas field by Israel, a gas field that is shared by Iran and Qatar. And we now have, of course, further threats of retaliatory strikes. Iran now threatening full-scale, on the front of the Express, full-scale economic war with retaliatory attacks across oil and gas plants across the world. And also, we still have the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, which is very, very far from resolved, absolutely blocked. And then we have our own kind of domestic situation. What is Starmer going to do? Does he want to get further involved? And what on earth is going on with Trump?
And it's a story that's on the front page of The Guardian, it's on the front page of various papers, but the Guardian kind of talking about a dangerous escalation. And to give a sense of context, when we kind of talk about the world's largest gas field, the installation, the operations along the coastline in Iran, there is an airfield, a complete airfield in the centre of those kind of gas terminals. That is how big the damn thing is. And you kind of look and go, well, at the end of February, beginning of March, you could kind of see maybe what the plan was. It was to take out the Ayatollah. It was maybe to try and find this 460 or so kilograms of excessively enriched uranium, certainly from the American perspective, and from Israel to weaken as much as it possibly could the regime. Now, 2.5 weeks on, you're like, where's this all going? It just feels very tit for tat in this last 24 hours.
Exactly, and that's why I use the word retaliatory and also explosive, because we're not just talking about a politically explosive situation. We are talking about plants that will explode. You know, we are talking about, as you say, the world's largest natural gas field, and which I think South Pars produces a fifth of the global energy. This is affecting everybody. This is going to affect, already prices are skyrocketing. We have, you know, oil prices shooting up and threats of over $200 a barrel. So where does this end? I mean, we're getting more of the same from Donald Trump in that, you know, he's going to retaliate by blowing everything up.
And that's the front page of the Mail. Iran wages full-scale economic war on the West. And I was in the US the last couple of weeks, and you just watch the price of gas on the forecourts increasing. I actually was driving along at one point, kind of some of the forecourts were refreshing their prices. And then you tune in to kind of the really American disc jockeys who are just playing track after track after track. And literally there was about 5 tracks in a row, and the only thing the disc jockey said was forecourt prices have gone up 39 cents in the last week, and then carried on playing music again. And then you look at Sri Lanka, for example, a country that imports huge amounts of its natural resources and energy resources. It's just announced Wednesdays off to try and reduce the burden on the system, because there is no fuel getting to places.
Exactly, and you know, how long until it does start to affect us here? Already we're hearing discussion of potential, shutdowns, potential queues at forecourts, and also we already seeing prices going up, obviously on people's heating oil, but also on the petrol forecourts. So, you know, it's hugely concerning.
And it's interesting, I was speaking to Kemi Badenoch yesterday, the leader of the Conservative Party. She said, look, we need to have more oil and gas licences. We need to baby drill, in kind of the words of Donald Trump in the North Sea. But that's a long-term prospect. It's
long-term. That is not an immediate solution. You know, we still have no conclusive decisions on that. We have Ed Miliband. We have so many different things going on here. We have Ed Miliband banging on about net zero on the one hand, which is, yes, a long-term laudable aim. But as you say, you know, Kemi Badenoch saying we need to drill, baby drill. But right now, we're going to face shortages unless the situation is resolved. And yesterday, the intelligence chief was eliminated. We had Ali Larijani earlier in the day. So, I mean, this is just getting more and more of a tinderbox in the region.
And with all of this going on, with strikes on Saudi, on Iraq, on the Emirates, on Oman, on Qatar, and then you have that footage, which lots of people, if they've paid even half a minute's attention to the Middle East, when they saw Donald Trump in the White House go, like, no experts could have predicted this happening. And you'd speak to any expert, even if they've only been studying it for a minute and a half, and go, this looked fairly inevitable. You know, there was always that pinch point at the Strait of Hormuz, in the same way that you've got, like, the Suez Canal or you've got the Panama Canal. There are these kind of 3 vital pinch points in global maritime shipping. And Iran had, whilst it's 21 miles wide, it has the capacity to shut it off completely.
Exactly, and it's virtually closed. And what are we going to do about it? And what is the UK going to do?
What do you think the UK will do?
I think Starmer at the moment is just, as we all are, watching the situation unfold and trying to work out what is the next best step. Because I don't think anyone has a plan. As you say, this was, 2 weeks ago, the first missile strikes happened. Now what? So I think Starmer is probably just watching and waiting to see what the next best step is.
I will say, you and I have it easy in moments like this. I don't envy those decision makers at all to try and balance, because this will come to an end at some point, but that relationship, that mind of Trump will remember what happens and who was there and who wasn't there, and maybe more tariffs come along the way, and that will all be feeding into the jigsaw of decision-making.
And they're balancing so much. They're balancing what the actual military capability is, which frigates we can actually send, which Navy warships we actually can send, because we can't send many, and what we have in the region, what we can actually do with the public mood, with the political kind of mood, with the mood of the Prime Minister's own party. So he's balancing so many different options here. And of course, our country is not in a good economic state either.
You talk about the mood of his own party. This segues quite nicely into a story that's in the Mail. It's also on the front page of the Telegraph as well. And pressure. It felt as though it had gone away, but it had quietened down, pressure on the Prime Minister. And you maybe could have argued that this situation was always quite a good kind of unifier sometimes for political parties. But despite that, pressure just bubbling back up to the surface again.
There's a lot bubbling under for Starmer at the moment. The Mandelson questions, which are still not being answered. As we saw yesterday at PMQs, a lot of questions that are not being answered. So that's all bubbling under. Plenty of speculation in Westminster at the moment that there is a lot more to come out on that one. But there's also this kind of thing that's dogging him, this label that's dogging him about his constant U-turns. I think we're on 17 or 18 U-turns. And on the front page of the Telegraph, we have Starmer possibly signalling a U-turn on the migrant policy, on the policy around who can get settled status in the UK, Recently, the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, had announced that that was going to be possibly increased from 5 years to 10 years to achieve settled status. It now looks like Starmer might be reconsidering that. That hasn't been confirmed by Number 10. This could affect around 1.6 million migrants. It may be that there will be certain exemptions for those working in the public sector, for example, for those who've been here for quite a while. Starmer here is trying to balance. He had this sort of quite blistering attack from his former Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, on the migration policy. And he's very worried about potentially the leadership challenge from Angela Rayner. So there's a lot that he needs to sort of fight off. There are many quite angry Labour MPs who are keen to see that this softened. But then there's also the public, and there's also the Home Secretary, who really feel that immigration rules need to be tightened up.
It's interesting when we talk about it. It's on a paper here, page 2 of the Mail as well. Rayner makes U-turn wobble. And whenever I use the word U-turn on air, I will always get some people say, well, no, hang on a second, these political parties present ideas. They're not always fully fleshed out, but they present them, and sometimes they refine them and change them. Now, there have been complete U-turns. We have seen complete U-turns. And I feel a little minded on this instance to potentially say that this does fall a little bit more into the refining category. Because when that white paper was published earlier in the year about these proposals, they did include the fact that there may be a transition period. They did include the fact that there may be carve-outs, that it won't be a full 10 years, but it might be 3 years if you pay over £125,000, or you're paid over £125,000 if you pay lots of tax and lots of income tax. So these were propositions that were already out there, but the way they're being framed, because of what's gone before, makes for tricky reading for the PM again.
It is, and it makes him look like he's frit. It makes him look like he's frit because of Angela Rayner's sort of threat, that she is a looming threat, that, there is going to be a leadership challenge after May, that Rayner came out and said this yesterday, and already he's having to do a U-turn. So it's all about the optics on this one. But as you say, the policy isn't fixed in stone yet. It is still at that stage, that consultation stage.
Yeah, and they announced that consultation. I think it wraps up like any day now, roughly, because it was 12 weeks or so. And on this one,
But, I mean, he has to choose his battles. There's quite a lot that Starmer needs to battle at the moment.
And he does. It's not just battles with politics, but battles with his own individuals
with
in
his own party. Exactly. And then with the voters who really do want tighter immigration rules. So, you know, there's a lot to juggle.
And then battles with other parties' reform as well, of
And then a
course.
big battle coming in May with the local elections.
Indeed, indeed. It'll be interesting to see where that goes. I'm also interested that we're a little quieter on the West Streeting element in the last couple of weeks or so. You know, maybe because of the unfortunate situation in Kent, that will kind of quieten those kind of voices around him.
So. Can they focus on doing their job rather than whether or not they're threatening to launch a leadership bid? He is actually the Home Secretary, and it's kind of important to remember that. Shabana Mahmood should actually be doing her Home Secretary job. Wes Streeting should actually be doing the Health Secretary job, and that's kind of important as well.
It was interesting yesterday, I was speaking to the head of the National Association of Pharmacists, who said they'd had almost no contact from the UK HSA, Health Security Agency, about the situation with regards to meningitis. He said to me they'd only really learnt about it by watching Sky News. You know, and so it was a pretty the last question, it was my final question, my last question was, to what degree have you had support, by the way? It's like nothing, really. And all of this, and I know a UK HSA is separate to the government, but all of this political infighting does distract from and we had that through
doing
Brexit.
The job. Absolutely.
For years.
Absolutely. For years there was infighting, which isn't at all about running the country. It's not at all about running the country. It's about, you know, their own careers or their own positions or their own kind of perspectives.
Just a couple of other stories, just to quickly note, on page 4 of The Times, there's kind of 2 interesting stories about Rolls-Royce dropping pledges to stop making fossil fuel cars by 2030. And then just beneath that, China unveiling an EV that charges in 5 minutes. And it, again, just kind of almost nods to the energy story that we're talking about so much at the moment. And there's lots of criticism towards Ed Miliband, for example, for trying to get to a net zero economy and trying to have more green energy production, etc. And you kind of see this, again, this real push and pull within industry as to what to do and how to go about trying to transition this nation.
Yeah, and they need to meet those targets. They need to follow the government's net zero drive, but they also need to make long-term plans. And it's very, very difficult when you've got these great big plans about achieving net zero by 2030. But for industry, when there aren't enough charging points, when they don't have the infrastructure, when they don't know whether people are going to buy, because some people are falling out of love with electric vehicles. When you don't know the future, a car is quite a long-term purchase for most people. Production of cars is, again, it's a long-term planning situation. So it's very difficult when the political situation is so unstable.
I bought a car in the last 6 months and went, I just don't think it's quite right in the time for an EV. And you're like, well, it's 22. I want to do it, but you don't feel as though there's quite the support structure in terms of the infrastructure there, which requires the support structure from the politicians and the legislation. It's a mosaic that all needs to come together. It just, for many people, won't feel like that.
And what will the next government plan?
Time will tell on that one. A week's long time in politics, let alone the rest of it. Really good to have you with us. Really good to have you with us. Stick with us here on Sky.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?